alive. That's not me in the casket." Those were the words that lit up on my phone screen while I stood over my husband's grave, clutching a handful of damp earth that refused to leave my fingers. My body froze. My heart pounded so violently that I thought it might give out right there in front of the casket. Leonard Carter. My husband of 42 years was supposed to be lying in that wooden box. We had buried him only minutes earlier, the sound of dirt hitting the coffin still echoing in my ears. Yet the message insisted otherwise. I looked around, searching for someone, anyone who might have sent it. The cemetery was nearly empty. Only my two sons, Marcus and Darius, stood a few feet away with their expensive black suits and rehearsed expressions of grief. Their tears looked forced, their hugs earlier had been cold, and now they watched the pastor with the patience of men waiting for a meeting to end rather than mourning their father. I swallowed hard and typed back, my hands trembling so badly that I could barely hit the keys. "Who are you?" The answer came almost instantly. "I can't say. They're watching. Don't trust our sons." The phone slipped from my grip, landing in the grass beside the grave. Gloria, my dearest friend, bent down to pick it up for me, but I snapped back to life just in time to stop her. I forced a smile, waved her off, and tucked the phone into my purse, as if nothing had happened. But inside, my soul was cracking open. Could it be true? Could Leonard really be alive? Or was this some cruel trick designed to break me even further on the worst day of my life? I dared to glance back at Marcus and Darius. Marcus, the eldest, stood tall with his broad shoulders, glancing at his watch like he had somewhere else to be. Darius shifted restlessly, his eyes darting toward the parking lot. Beside them, Monique, Marcus's wife, scrolled on her phone under her black veil, showing more interest in a text thread than in her father-in-law's farewell. None of it felt real. None of it felt right. The pastor's voice droned on about eternal peace, about rest, about a life well lived. But I barely heard him. All I could hear were those words echoing in my head. "I'm alive. Don't trust our sons." I forced myself to replay the last week in my mind. The hospital call, the rushed explanations, the quiet funeral with so few people invited. Leonard had worked in his repair shop for decades, yet none of his longtime customers or neighbors stood here to say goodbye. Why had Marcus insisted on arranging everything so quickly with no time for friends to gather? Why had Darius brushed off my protests, telling me it was better this way, that Dad would have wanted something simple? Leonard had been part of this community his entire life. He would never have wanted to leave it in silence. When it came time for me to toss the handful of dirt onto the casket, my legs buckled. Gloria held me up, whispering that Leonard would want me to be strong. I wanted to believe her, but how could I when doubt was already blooming like poison inside my chest? We returned to the house afterward, the same modest home Leonard and I had built together in Atlanta, the one we had filled with laughter, sacrifice, and love. The walls still smelled faintly of his coffee. His work boots sat by the door, as if waiting for him to slip them on. His pillow upstairs carried the imprint of his head. Every object screamed his presence, even as everyone told me he was gone. That night I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the phone that had delivered those haunting words. My heart begged me to believe them, to believe that Leonard might somehow still be alive. My mind warned me it could be a lie, a scam, a cruel joke. But deep down, I already knew something was terribly wrong. Leonard's accident had never made sense. The story about a machine exploding in the shop, the way Marcus and Darius had shown up at the hospital before I'd even arrived, the way they spoke about insurance policies while their father fought for his life, it all gnawed at me like a splinter buried too deep to pull out. Now with this message, the splinter had become a knife. I remembered Leonard's face the last time I saw him alive in that hospital room, his body covered in bandages, machines breathing for him. I remembered the faint squeeze of his hand, the almost invisible twitch of his lips, as though he was trying to tell me something. What if he had been trying to warn me? What if he had known what was happening all along? The phone buzzed again. My blood turned to ice. Check the bank account, see who's been moving money. I clutched the phone to my chest and whispered a prayer. If this was Leonard speaking to me from beyond, or if it was someone trying to protect me in his place, I didn't know. But I knew one thing for certain. This was not the end of Leonard's story. It was only the beginning of mine. I did not sleep that night. I stayed at the kitchen table with Leonard's coffee mug still sitting by the sink, as if waiting for him to come home. Every sip he ever took from it echoed in my mind. My heart longed to believe the messages, and at the same time I was terrified of the possibility that they were true. As the hours dragged by, I found myself drifting back to the beginning, to the very first days, when Leonard and I started this life together. Sometimes memories arrive like sharp blades cutting you open before you even realize it. I was 24 when Leonard first walked out of his small repair shop in Atlanta with grease on his hands and a smile so shy it melted me instantly. I had been working as a house cleaner to take care of my sick mother. We had nothing but old shoes and determination, yet in his eyes I saw a future. He asked if I needed him to check my bicycle. I did not even own one, but I invented an excuse to keep talking to him. That excuse became the first of many long conversations under the oak trees at the neighborhood park. We were poor, but there was a joy in those early years that no money could ever buy. Our wedding was small, our house had a tin roof that leaked when it rained, but every drop of water that fell into the pots we placed around the floor sounded like music compared to the silence of loneliness. When Marcus was born, Leonard wept as though he had been given the entire world in one tiny bundle. 2 years later, Darius arrived, and I thought my heart would burst with happiness. They had Leonard's eyes wide and full of life, and my smile, which at the time still believed the future would be bright. Leonard was a devoted father. He took the boys fishing on Sundays and taught them how to use their hands to fix anything that was broken. At night, he told them stories, his voice low and steady, while I stood at the door listening to the sound of my family breathing as one. For years, that was enough. For years, I thought we had everything. But children grow, and sometimes they grow into strangers. Marcus was the first to change. Even as a boy, he looked around at our modest home with restless eyes. He asked why we did not have a car like the neighbors, why our house looked so small compared to others. Darius followed him in almost everything. When Marcus dismissed our life as not good enough, Darius nodded along. The day Marcus turned 18, Leonard offered him a job in the shop. It was his pride, the place where his father had once worked, the legacy he hoped to pass down. Marcus looked him in the eye and said words that I will never forget. "I don't want to get my hands dirty like you, Dad. I'm going to be somebody important." The rejection carved something out of Leonard that never grew back. He still sat on the porch every evening, but now his gaze at the stars carried a weight of sadness. He never spoke of it directly, but I knew. He had lost not just his son's help, but also his respect. Marcus left for the city soon after, and to my surprise, he made a name for himself quickly in real estate. Darius followed the same path, never questioning, always walking in his brother's shadow. At first, I told myself to be proud. My boys were successful. They were breaking free of poverty. That was what every parent wanted, was it not? But success has a way of changing people, and not always for the better. Their visits grew shorter, their calls colder. When they did return, they stepped out of shiny cars and tailored suits, talking about investments and properties. They looked at us as if we were reminders of something they wanted to erase. Marcus once said to me, "Mom, you and Dad should move somewhere better. This house is falling apart." He was right about the condition, but he did not see the memories woven into the walls, the laughter and tears soaked into the wood. To him, it was only a broken structure. To me, it was home. Leonard, always wiser than me, warned that money had changed them. He said, "We are not enough for them anymore." I fought against that thought, excusing their absence with stories of busy schedules and demanding jobs. But deep down, I knew he was right. The change became undeniable when Marcus married Monique. She walked into our home for the first time wearing a red dress that seemed too elegant for the dirt of our porch. Her handshake was light, her smile thin, her eyes full of disdain. She barely touched the dinner I prepared, pushing food around her plate as if it might contaminate her. I overheard Marcus whisper, "Next time we will take them to a restaurant." Those words cut deeper than any insult. Darius remained single, yet he mirrored his brother's distance. His visits were hurried, his eyes always on his phone, his voice rushing through excuses about meetings and deadlines. The warmth of family dinners vanished. Holidays became transactions with expensive gifts and cold conversations. One night, Leonard sat with me on the porch, his hand covering mine. He said, "The saddest part is not that they have money. It is that money has convinced them we no longer matter." I did not want to accept it. I clung to hope, prayed for the boys we had raised to return. But as the years passed, the distance only grew. And I could not see then what I see now, that distance was not just emotional. It was the first step toward betrayal, the kind that would end with Leonard in a grave and me clutching a phone whispering that he might still be alive. It was after Marcus married Monique that the true distance set in, not just in miles, but in spirit. The first time she stepped into our home, her high heels sank into the dirt path leading to the porch, and her lips pressed into a smile that never reached her eyes. She extended her hand to me, fingertips only as if she were afraid of touching anything too ordinary. "Nice to meet you," she said, though her tone carried more judgment than warmth. Inside, she looked around with a gaze that traveled over every crack in the walls and every piece of worn furniture. I felt smaller under her stare than I had ever felt in my own house. Dinner that night was unbearable. I had prepared chicken and meatloaf, Leonard's favorite, but Monique barely touched it. She cut tiny pieces, moved them around her plate, and left most of it untouched. Marcus whispered to her, "Next time we will take them out to a restaurant." He thought I could not hear, but I did, and with each word my heart bled. From then on, visits felt like obligations rather than reunions. Marcus arrived in sleek cars, talking endlessly about property deals and investments. Darius mirrored him, eager to prove he could keep up. Instead of laughter filling our kitchen, I heard the language of money, of acquisitions and deals. One afternoon, Marcus leaned back in his chair and said, "Mom, Dad, you really should sell this house. You could move into a retirement community. It would be more comfortable." Retirement community. The words hit me like a slap. This house was where Leonard and I had built our life, raised our sons, survived storms, and celebrated milestones. It was not just walls and wood, it was our history. But to Marcus and Darius, it was little more than an obstacle, an old relic standing in the way of their polished new lives. Leonard answered calmly, his dignity unshaken. "We do not need a community, son. We are fine here." Yet I saw the look on both their faces. They did not believe us. They did not want to believe us. In their eyes, we were no longer parents, but problems that needed solving. The pressure grew with each visit. Marcus showed up with documents, already prepared contracts for selling the house. "Dad, Mom," he said with that well-practiced smile, "this house is worth so little. If you sell, I can add some money to help you move somewhere better." Better. That was his word. To him, better meant new walls, new furniture, and distance from the life that had shaped us. To us, no place could be better than the home filled with decades of love. Leonard tried to reason with him. "Son, working in my shop is not a burden. It gives meaning to my days." But Marcus and Darius insisted, "At your age, an accident could be dangerous. You should not risk it." Their words sounded like concern, but behind them I sensed something sharper, something impatient. It was not just about comfort, it was about control. Then Marcus said something that chilled me. "Jasmine and I are planning to have kids soon. We will need help with expenses. If you sell the house, that money could be an early inheritance." An early inheritance. My heart clenched. He was asking for his share while his father and I still breathed. Leonard remained calm, though I saw his jaw tighten. "Son, when your mother and I pass, everything we have will be yours. But while we live, our decisions are our own." Darius, usually quieter, cut in with an edge I had never heard from him. "Do not be stubborn. You are old now. You cannot keep living in the past." That night after they left, Leonard and I sat in silence on the porch. The stars hung above us, but for the first time in decades, they gave me no comfort. "Something is wrong," Leonard said softly. "This is not just impatience. There is something darker behind their pressure." I wanted to deny it, to cling to hope, but deep down I felt the same unease. My sons were no longer the boys I had raised. They had become strangers, men with polished shoes and empty eyes, men who measured life only in numbers. 3 weeks before Leonard's death, Marcus visited without Monique. He sat at the same kitchen table where he had eaten breakfast as a child. His words seemed rehearsed. "Mom, no matter what happens, Darius and I will take care of you." At the time, I felt comforted. Now, remembering those words in the shadow of his grave, they chilled me to the bone. No matter what happens, what had he known that I did not? The answer would arrive sooner than I imagined, and it would not come gently. It would arrive with a phone call, a hospital bed, and the first cracks in the world I thought I understood. It was a Tuesday morning when the call came. I was in the kitchen preparing Leonard's favorite lunch meatloaf with mashed potatoes when the phone rang with such urgency that my hands went cold before I even picked it up. "Mrs. Carter," a voice said, "this is Memorial Hospital. Your husband has been in a serious accident. You need to come immediately." The world tilted under me. My legs turned weak, and I clung to the counter for support. "What happened? Is he alive? Please come as soon as possible," the voice repeated. Gloria, my neighbor and closest friend, drove me because my hands were shaking too much to even hold the keys. The ride was a blur of sirens in my head, and prayers whispered through trembling lips. Leonard was always so careful in his shop. Every tool was checked, every machine cleaned. An accident seemed impossible. When we arrived, my sons were already there. That was the first detail that pierced me like a thorn. I had been the emergency contact for Leonard for 40 years. How could Marcus and Darius have arrived before me unless someone had told them before the hospital even called Mom? "Marcus," said, rushing toward me with arms that felt more like a trap than a comfort. "Dad is in bad shape. The doctors say a machine exploded. He has severe burns and head trauma." My chest tightened, but something in his eyes unsettled me. It was not grief, not even fear. It was calculation, as if he was waiting for news about numbers, not about life. "Can I see him?" I begged. "Only immediate family, one at a time," a nurse answered. I walked into that ICU room and nearly collapsed. Leonard lay surrounded by machines, tubes, and monitors. Bandages covered his arms, his chest, most of his face. For a moment, I thought I had entered the wrong room because I could not recognize the man I loved. But when I touched his hand, the only part of him left bare, I felt the faintest squeeze. His eyes fluttered behind closed lids. He was fighting. My Leonard was fighting to come back to me. I whispered, "I am here, my love. You will recover. You always do." The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I stayed at the hospital, sleeping in hard chairs, refusing to leave his side. Marcus and Darius took turns being there, but their interest seemed focused on the doctor's words, not on their father's life. I overheard Marcus asking about life insurance policies. I caught Darius asking about workers' compensation. Why were they talking about money while Leonard was still breathing? On the second day, Marcus sat next to me and said in a careful voice, "Mom, Dad has a $50,000 life insurance policy. With workers' comp, it could be even more." I stared at him in disbelief. "I do not care about money," I snapped. "I want your father alive." "Of course, Mom," he said quickly, but his eyes betrayed a different truth. On the third day, the doctor called me into his office. Dr. Patterson was an older man with kind eyes, but his words shattered me. "Mrs. Carter, your husband's condition is critical. The burns are badly infected, and the head trauma is more severe than we first believed. The chances of recovery are extremely low." "What does that mean?" I whispered, though I already knew. "It means you should prepare for the worst." My world broke into pieces. 42 years of marriage, a lifetime of memories, slipping away like water through my fingers. I begged them to do everything possible, but when I turned, Marcus and Darius exchanged a look that froze my blood. "Mom," Marcus said softly, "Dad would not want to live like this. He always said he never wanted to be a burden, a burden." The word tore out of me in fury. "He is your father, not a burden. We are only thinking about you," Darius added, but his voice trembled more from nerves than from sadness. That night I sat alone by Leonard's bed. His machines beeped steadily, a fragile rhythm of life. I held his hand and whispered through tears, "My love, they say there is no hope, but I cannot let you go. If you can hear me, please give me a sign." And then it happened. His fingers squeezed mine again, stronger this time. His lips moved faintly, though no sound emerged. I cried out for the nurses. "He is responding. He is trying to speak." By the time they arrived, the movement was gone. The nurse shook her head. "Sometimes there are muscle spasms, ma'am. It does not mean consciousness." But I knew. Leonard had been trying to tell me something. 2 nights later, alarms rang through the hallways. I woke from a restless sleep in the waiting chair to flashing lights and rushing footsteps. I ran to Leonard's room screaming, "No, please, no!" The doctors worked on him for 40 minutes, but at 4:37 a.m., they declared him dead. I collapsed over his body, clutching him, refusing to let go. When Marcus and Darius arrived, they were strangely composed, too composed. They brought papers for funeral arrangements, phone numbers for insurance companies, contacts for funeral homes. They had everything ready as if they had expected this outcome. Marcus said, "We already spoke to the funeral home. They can take the body this morning." Darius added, "The insurance claim is already in process." I looked at them through my tears, unable to understand how 2 sons could be so efficient, so organized, so cold, just hours after their father's death. The funeral was set for the following Monday. Marcus handled everything with speed that left me breathless. He chose a simple casket, a short service, and told me it was what Dad would have wanted. But Leonard would never have wanted such haste, such emptiness. He loved his community, and he deserved their farewell. The day of the funeral, the sky was heavy and gray. I wore the only black dress I owned. Gloria helped button the back and whispered for me to stay strong. But strength felt like an impossible request. Only a handful of people came, my sons Monique, Gloria, and the pastor. Where were Leonard's neighbors, his customers, his friends? "We did not invite them," Marcus said when I asked. "Dad was private. He would have wanted it intimate." But that was a lie. Leonard loved people. He would have wanted them to say goodbye. And it was at that graveside when my phone buzzed with those impossible words. I am alive that I realized this story was far from over. That night after the funeral, the house felt like a tomb. Every corner held Leonard's presence, yet the silence pressed down on me until I could hardly breathe. His chair on the porch sat empty, his boots by the door untouched. I walked from room to room as if searching for him, whispering his name, begging him to step out of the shadows. The phone on the counter buzzed again. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Check the bank account. See who's been moving money. The message came from the same number as before. My breath caught. Whoever this was knew far too much. I clutched the phone to my chest. If it was Leonard, if somehow he had found a way to reach me, I had to listen. And if it was someone else they knew, details only a person close to us could possibly know. The next morning, I forced myself to the bank. Mrs. Thompson, the manager, had known Leonard and me for years. She greeted me with sorrow in her eyes. "Evelyn, I am so sorry for your loss. Leonard was a good man." "Thank you," I whispered. "I need to review our accounts." She pulled out the records for the past 6 months, and what I saw made my stomach twist. Large withdrawals had been made thousands of dollars at a time. $1,000 in January, $3,000 in February, $4,000 in March. I shook my head. This cannot be right. Leonard never told me about this. Mrs. Thompson hesitated. "He came in himself," she said gently. "He told us it was for repairs at the shop. Repairs. Leonard was meticulous about his finances. He would never have withdrawn that much without telling me." My voice faltered. "Can I see the receipts?" She laid them out on the desk. The signatures looked like Leonard's, but shaky, hesitant, not his usual confident handwriting. My heart pounded harder. "Did he come alone?" I asked. "Now that you mention it," she said, "I believe one of your sons came with him once or twice. Marcus, I think. He said Leonard needed help reading the documents without his glasses. My knees nearly gave way. Leonard never left the house without his glasses. His eyesight was perfect when he wore them. That excuse was nothing more than a lie." I thanked Mrs. Thompson, though my voice barely worked, and carried the receipts home. I laid them on the kitchen table, staring at them until the numbers blurred. My phone buzzed again. The insurance was their idea. They convinced Leonard he needed more protection for you. It was a trap. I gasped, covering my mouth. My sons had pressured Leonard into increasing his life insurance, into signing policies he never wanted. My mind spun back to Marcus and Darius at the hospital, talking about insurance while their father still breathed. Had it all been planned? That evening, I searched through Leonard's desk in the shop. He had kept a metal box filled with documents, the house deed shop records, and every insurance policy we had ever carried. I flipped through page after page until my eyes caught on something chilling. The life insurance had been updated just 6 months earlier, raised from $5,000 to $50,000. Another policy had been added 2 months before his death, a workers' comp policy worth $15,000 in case of an accident on the job. Leonard had never mentioned these changes to me. My hands shook as I remembered his quiet unease, the way he sometimes looked at Marcus with suspicion. Had he known? In the bottom drawer, I found a note in Leonard's familiar script, dated just days before the accident. Marcus insists I need more insurance. He says it is for Evelyn. But something feels wrong. I do not trust his intentions. Another note rested beneath it. Darius brought me papers to sign. He says it is to modernize the shop, but I do not understand. Why the hurry? Tears blurred my eyes as I read his warnings from beyond. Leonard had felt their pressure. He had sensed something dark growing in our own sons. I leaned back, pressing my fist to my mouth, fighting a scream. My own flesh and blood. My sons. As night fell, another message appeared. Go to the shop again. Look in his desk. There are things you missed. I returned with a flashlight, searching every drawer, every folder, and then I found an envelope with my name written across the front in Leonard's hand. I opened it with trembling fingers. My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, something has happened to me. In recent months, I have noticed changes in Marcus and Darius. They are too interested in money and the insurance in us selling the house. Monique is putting pressure on them as well. Yesterday, Marcus told me I should be more careful about my safety. At my age, he said any accident could be fatal. It sounded less like advice and more like a warning. I love you. If something happens, do not trust blindly, not even our sons. The letter fell from my hands. My heart ached with grief and rage. Leonard had seen it coming. He had feared what I had refused to believe. Later that week, Marcus visited with Monique. He brought a bottle of wine and that smile I now recognized as a mask. He said smoothly, "Mom, the insurance money is already in process. You will get $15,000. My head snapped up. How do you know the exact amount? He did not even flinch. I helped Dad with the paperwork, he said. He wanted to make sure you would be comfortable. But I remembered Leonard's note. He had been pressured, not comforted. What do you think I should do with the money, I asked, my voice steady though my stomach churned. Marcus's eyes lit up. You could buy a smaller house or even better move into a retirement community where you would have company and care. Darius and I can manage the money for you. We know about investments. We could triple it. Manage my money. Triple it. My blood boiled. I forced myself to nod, pretending to consider. Let me think about it. Of course, Monique chimed in sweetly, but not too long. For your own good. When they left, I locked the door and sat trembling at the table. My sons, my own flesh and blood, had killed their father for money, and now they were circling me like vultures. The phone buzzed once more, delivering a final push. Tomorrow, go to the police station. Ask for the report on Leonard's accident. There are things you need to know. I clutched the phone in both hands. My heart knew what my mind refused to accept. The accident had been no accident, and now I would find out the truth even if it destroyed me. The following morning, I dressed carefully as if preparing for battle. I carried Leonard's notes in my purse, the receipts from the bank, and the heavy weight of suspicion pressing against my ribs. The walk to the police station felt longer than it ever had, though it was only a few blocks from my house. Inside, Sergeant David Brooks, a man who had known Leonard for decades, greeted me with a puzzled look. Mrs. Carter, what brings you in today? I need the report on my husband's accident, I said firmly, though my voice quivered. He frowned. Accident? What accident? At his words, the air seemed to vanish from the room. From his shop, I whispered. The machine that exploded. That is why he was in the hospital. Sergeant Brooks shook his head slowly. Ma'am, we do not have any report of an explosion at Leonard's shop. In fact, there is no work accident on file for him at all. The ground beneath me felt like it had shifted. But my sons told me, I stammered. They said a machine exploded. Brooks tapped on his keyboard, pulling up records. According to the medical report, Leonard was admitted unconscious with symptoms of poisoning. Poisoning. The word rang in my ears like a bell of doom. Yes. Brooks continued, his voice lowering. The doctors found traces of methanol in his blood, a large amount enough to cause brain damage, blindness, eventually death. I staggered, grabbing the edge of the desk to keep from falling. Why was I never told this? The sergeant's face tightened. According to hospital files, the immediate family requested the details be kept confidential to spare you unnecessary pain. Immediate family. My sons. They had hidden the truth from me, wrapped me in a web of lies while my husband lay dying from poison. Tears burned my eyes, but fury burned hotter. Sergeant Brooks looked at me carefully. Mrs. Carter, if you suspect foul play, we can open a formal investigation. I wanted to scream yes, to hand him every note, every receipt, every message. But a small voice inside me told me to be careful. Marcus and Darius were already moving fast, trying to push me into a retirement home, trying to seize control of the money. If they sensed I was onto them, they might accelerate their plans. Thank you, Sergeant, I whispered. I will think about it. When I returned home, the house felt different. I no longer saw Leonard's absence alone. I saw shadows of danger in every corner. My sons were not grieving men. They were predators circling their prey. That evening, Darius arrived carrying a bouquet of flowers, his smile too polished, his voice too sweet. How are you, Mom? You look tired. I forced a smile. I am fine, just thinking about the future. That is good, he said, setting the flowers on the table. Marcus and I believe it is time to sell the house. The market is strong right now. Why the rush? I asked. He hesitated, then rattled off excuses. Old houses lose value quickly. You need liquidity for expenses. Funeral costs pending medical bills. But there were no pending bills. The insurance had covered them. And the funeral had been insultingly cheap. Lies piling one on top of another. I looked him straight in the eyes. You knew your father did not die from a work accident. For a moment, his face flickered with panic before smoothing back into calm. What are you talking about, Mom? I went to the police station, I said slowly. There is no record of an explosion. This time his mask cracked deeper. His eyes darted, his hands clenched. Mom, you should not be running around asking questions. Grief can make you imagine things. Imagine things. That was what they wanted to paint me as: unstable, unreliable, an old woman losing her mind. He left quickly, muttering that we would talk again when I was calmer. From the porch, I watched him place a hurried phone call, his tone urgent, his words too low for me to hear. That night, my phone buzzed again. They are coming together tomorrow. They will try to convince you that you are crazy. Do not believe them, and do not eat or drink anything they bring. My blood ran cold. I thought back to Leonard's final squeeze of my hand, his lips moving, trying to warn me. I had not been wrong. My sons were not just greedy. They were dangerous. The next afternoon, Marcus and Darius arrived together with Monique at their side. They carried a box of pastries from the downtown bakery and a bag of coffee. Mom, Marcus said in a syrupy tone, "We are so worried about you. The neighbors told us you have been acting strangely. Gloria says you are not eating well." Gloria had never said such a thing. Monique smiled sweetly. "We brought your favorite pastries and special coffee too. You need to eat properly." The phone's warning echoed in my head. Do not eat or drink anything. Thank you, I said, keeping my voice steady. But I already had breakfast. Their eyes flickered with disappointment. Marcus leaned closer, lowering his voice. Mom, we want to help you, but lately you have been asking strange questions, going to the police, obsessing about Dad's death. It is normal to feel paranoid at your age after such a loss. Paranoid. There it was, the word meant to destroy me. I am not paranoid, I said firmly. I am asking the questions I should have asked from the beginning. The silence between us thickened. Darius glanced at Marcus. Monique looked away. I knew then that the battle lines had been drawn. My sons were no longer my sons. They were conspirators, liars, and perhaps even murderers. And if I wanted to survive, I would have to fight them with the one weapon they underestimated: the truth. The following morning, I sat at the kitchen table, Leonard's letter spread before me, the warnings from my phone glowing in my mind like fire. Every word confirmed what my heart already feared. My sons had not only betrayed their father, they had built a trap for me as well. At precisely 3 o'clock that afternoon, I followed the instructions from the last message. My legs shook as I walked to the small cafe on the corner. The air was heavy, the kind that makes you feel as though the world itself is holding its breath. I stepped inside and spotted him immediately. A tall man in his 50s with graying hair and eyes that held both caution and kindness sat at the back table. A brown folder rested under his arm. When his gaze met mine, he nodded once. "Mrs. Carter?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I whispered, sliding into the seat across from him. "My name is Detective Raymond Scott. I am a private investigator. I was hired by your husband 3 weeks before his death." The words nearly knocked the air from my lungs. Leonard had known. Raymond leaned closer. He was suspicious of Marcus and Darius. He feared they were pressuring him into decisions he did not want to make. He asked me to keep watch discreetly in case anything happened. My eyes blurred with tears. Even in his final days, Leonard had been protecting me. Raymond opened the folder and placed a small voice recorder on the table. "I want you to listen to this." He pressed play, and Leonard's voice filled the space between us. "Raymond, if something happens to me, it will not be an accident. Marcus and Darius keep pushing me to increase my life insurance. Yesterday, Marcus brought papers that claim to protect Evelyn, but the clauses also benefit him and Darius directly. I cannot shake the feeling they are planning something." I pressed my hand over my mouth, hearing my husband speak from beyond the grave. His voice was steady but tinged with fear. "There is more," Raymond said, pressing another button. This time it was Marcus's voice. "No, we cannot wait any longer. The old man is suspicious. Yesterday he asked too many questions about the insurance. Yes, I already have the methanol. It will look like a stroke or a heart attack. By the time anyone figures it out, it will be too late." Tears streamed down my face as the recording played on. Raymond's voice was gentle. "And here is Darius the day before Leonard was admitted to the hospital." A new recording crackled. "Everything is ready. Marcus will mix it in with his coffee. We told him it was a supplement. He will drink it without question. The symptoms will be confusion, blindness, then coma. They will never prove it was poison." I clutched the table, my body trembling violently. My sons, my babies I had nursed and raised with every ounce of love I had, planning their father's death like it was a business deal. "How did you get this?" I whispered. "Leonard asked me to place recording devices in your home phone and in certain places in the shop," Raymond explained. "He knew something was wrong, even if he could not prove it. He laid out photographs next. Marcus leaving a hardware store with a small bottle in his hands, paying in cash, his head lowered as though he feared recognition. The date was 5 days before Leonard collapsed. And there is more, Raymond said, sliding bank records toward me. Marcus owes $70,000 to loan sharks in the city. Darius has gambling debts of over $40,000. They were drowning. The insurance policies were their lifeline. My head spun. Every puzzle piece was falling into place, painting a picture so dark I struggled to breathe. "Why did you not go to the police right away?" I asked. "Because they bribed the hospital doctor." Raymond answered grimly. "The death certificate lists heart failure caused by a supposed accident. Without solid evidence, the recordings alone might not have been enough." He leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "But now we have it all. The recordings, the photos, the debts, the notes from Leonard, even the toxicology results that show methanol." I shook my head in disbelief. "And they were planning to hurt me too." Raymond nodded and pressed play one last time. Marcus's voice again colder than I had ever heard it. "Once Dad's money comes in, we cannot risk Mom asking questions. We will make it look like she could not handle losing him. A widow giving up taking her own life. No one will question it." A scream tore from my chest before I could stop it. Every eye in the cafe turned toward me. I covered my face with my hands, sobbing silently. Raymond lowered his voice. "Mrs. Carter, I know this is unbearable, but you need to be strong. Your husband trusted me to bring this to you, and we must act quickly. Your sons are already preparing to have you declared mentally incompetent tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" My voice broke. "Yes, I intercepted a call this morning. They are meeting Judge Anthony Reed at 10 to begin the process. If they succeed, they will gain legal control over your money, your home, your life. I wiped my tears, my grief transforming into something harder, sharper. Resolve. Then we act tonight. Raymond nodded. Exactly. We will go to Sergeant Brooks with this evidence before they can make another move. He gathered the papers and the recordings back into the folder, sliding it into my hands. As I held the weight of proof, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time since Leonard's death, I was no longer only a widow drowning in sorrow. I was a fighter, armed with the truth. My sons thought they could silence me. They thought I was weak. But they had forgotten one thing. A mother defending her husband's memory is stronger than any scheme they could ever build. I walked out of that cafe into the fading light of day with the folder pressed to my chest. I was no longer afraid. I was ready for war. That night, I could hardly sit still. The folder Raymond Scott had given me lay on the table, its weight more powerful than any weapon. Inside those pages and recordings was the truth, and with it the only chance Leonard and I had left for justice. But I knew Marcus and Darius would not surrender easily. Just after sunset, headlights flashed outside my window. The doorbell rang. When I opened the door, both my sons stood there with Monique beside them, her smile painted on like fresh lacquer. Marcus held a box of pastries. Darius carried a bag of coffee beans. "Mom," Marcus said, his voice dripping with false concern, "we have been worried. People in the neighborhood say you have been acting strangely. We thought we should come by and check on you." Gloria never told them anything. I knew it was another lie. Monique stepped forward, lifting the box. "We brought your favorite pastries. You need to eat." "And I made sure we found that special coffee brand you like," Darius added, holding the bag toward me. The warning from my phone replayed in my head. "Do not eat or drink anything they bring." "Thank you," I said, keeping my tone even. But I already had dinner. For a flicker of a second, disappointment flashed in Marcus's eyes. He set the pastries on the counter anyway, as though claiming territory. "Mom," he said, his voice softening to that rehearsed sympathy, "we know how hard this has been. But you are not yourself lately, going to the police, asking questions, imagining conspiracies. It is grief, Mom. Grief makes people see shadows where there are none." "Paranoia," Darius added gravely. "We even spoke to Dr. Reed. He says it is common for women your age after losing a spouse." My stomach clenched. They were not just trying to discredit me in conversation. They had already spoken to a judge, already planting seeds of incompetence. I straightened my shoulders. "I am not paranoid. I am asking the questions you do not want answered. Like why there is no record of an accident at your father's shop. Like why the shop is spotless when you said a machine exploded. Like who withdrew thousands from our savings with shaky signatures that do not look like Leonard's." The silence that followed was louder than any shout. Marcus's jaw tightened. Darius shifted his weight. Monique's fake smile froze. "We just want to help you, Mom," Marcus said finally, but his tone had hardened. "If you do not cooperate, we will have no choice but to take legal steps." "Legal steps?" My voice was quiet but steady. "Yes," he said coldly. "We can petition the court to declare you mentally incompetent. We already have medical statements. It would be best for everyone. Best for everyone." The words rang like a death sentence. I nodded slowly, buying myself time. "Let me think about it." "Of course," Monique said sweetly, "but not too long. For your own good." When they left, I locked the door and collapsed into a chair. My sons had just declared war on me. If I did nothing, they would lock me away and drain every cent Leonard had worked for. At 8 o'clock, sharp Raymond knocked on the door. He carried the folder, his expression urgent. "Are you ready?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. We drove together to the police station under the cover of night. My hands clutched the folder as though it were Leonard's hand guiding me. When we walked in, Sergeant Brooks looked up from his desk in surprise. "Mrs. Carter," Detective Scott Raymond placed the folder on his desk. "We are here to file a formal complaint. For the next 2 hours, we laid everything out. The recordings of Marcus buying methanol of Darius, describing how they would slip it into Leonard's coffee. The photographs, the bank records, the medical report showing methanol in his blood. And finally, Leonard's handwritten notes warning me not to trust even his own sons." Sergeant Brooks listened with a face that grew darker by the minute. When the last recording played, Marcus's voice coldly planning my own death, the sergeant leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "This is monstrous." He stood and picked up the phone, calling the district attorney himself. Within the hour, the DA arrived, reviewed the evidence, and signed 2 arrest warrants. At dawn, Brooke said firmly, "We will arrest them both before they have time to destroy anything else." Raymond walked me home. The night air felt different, charged with both dread and hope. "Are you sure you will be all right alone?" he asked gently. "I will be fine," I said. For the first time in weeks, I was not lying. I stayed up the rest of the night staring at Leonard's picture on the mantel. For the first time since his death, I felt a glimmer of peace. Justice was coming. At 6 in the morning, my phone rang. It was Marcus. "Mom, you need to come to Darius's house right away. Something terrible has happened." My grip on the phone tightened. "What happened I will explain in person. Please hurry." I forced calm into my voice. "I am on my way." But I did not move. I sat in the kitchen chair, staring at the clock. At 7:30, sirens wailed in the distance. I peeked through the curtains and saw police cars speeding toward both my sons' houses. The phone rang again and again. Marcus, first, then Darius, their voices growing more desperate with every unanswered call. I let them ring. At 9 o'clock sharp, there was a knock on my door. Mrs. Carter, Sergeant Brooks said, his expression firm. "We have them. Marcus and Darius Carter are in custody, charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder." My legs trembled, but this time it was from relief. I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer of gratitude. The storm was not over. The trial was yet to come. But in that moment, standing in my doorway with the morning sun on my face, I felt something I had not felt since the day Leonard collapsed. I felt hope. The news of the arrests spread through Atlanta like wildfire. By the end of that same day, neighbors who had once waved politely at Marcus and Darius now whispered in shock behind closed doors. Headlines filled the local papers, 2 brothers accused of killing father for insurance money. I could hardly leave the house without someone stopping me to ask if it was true. I gave no answers. I saved my strength for the courtroom. The trial was scheduled 2 months later. Every day leading up to it felt heavy with anticipation. Reporters called, strangers sent letters, and friends urged me to stay strong. I knew the eyes of the city would be on us, but my focus was singular. Leonard deserved justice, and I was the only one left to stand for him. The courthouse overflowed on the first day. Every seat was filled, and still people lined the hallway hoping to glimpse the proceedings. The weight of the community pressed in the shock of 2 sons accused of patricide, pulling everyone into the spectacle. When Marcus and Darius entered in orange prison uniforms, shackles clinking softly at their ankles, my breath caught. I had not seen them since the day of their arrest. Marcus's shoulders slumped, his eyes darting nervously across the room. Darius kept his head high, jaw tight, eyes defiant. For a fleeting second, I remembered them as little boys in Sunday clothes tugging at Leonard's hands. Then the memory vanished, replaced by the men they had become. The prosecutor wasted no time. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "this case is not about desperation alone. It is about greed so consuming that 2 men chose to kill the very father who raised them. You will hear their voices cold and deliberate as they plan his death. You will see the evidence that ties every thread together, and you will understand why justice demands their conviction." One by one, the recordings were played. Leonard's voice filled the courtroom, calm yet fearful, speaking to Raymond Scott about his suspicions. Then Marcus's voice followed, sharp and chilling. "I already have the methanol. It will look like a stroke. By the time they figure it out, it will be too late." Gasps echoed from the gallery. Even the judge's brow furrowed in disbelief. Next came Darius's recording. "Marcus will mix it in with his coffee. He thinks it is a vitamin supplement. He will drink it without question. The symptoms will match a stroke. No one will ever know." I could hardly breathe as the jury listened. Some covered their mouths. Others stared at Marcus and Darius with open disgust. The betrayal was undeniable, carved into every syllable. Raymond Scott testified next, steady and clear. He explained how Leonard had hired him, how he had planted recording devices, how he had intercepted calls and tracked purchases. He held up photographs showing Marcus leaving the hardware store with the small bottle of methanol. He displayed bank records of their crushing debts. He presented everything with precision until there was no doubt that the brothers had been cornered by their own actions. When my turn came to testify, I rose with trembling legs. The oath felt heavy on my tongue. I looked at the jury, then at my sons. I raised them with love. I began my voice quivering yet firm. Leonard and I gave them everything we could. He worked with his hands until they were raw. I sacrificed every dream to put food on the table. And still they looked at us with shame. They wanted more. They wanted money. And when they could not wait, they took his life. Marcus's head bowed. Darius glared, eyes burning with something between rage and desperation. The defense tried to argue they were victims of circumstance, that crushing debts and outside pressure clouded their judgment. They even brought Monique to the stand. She cried, saying Marcus was under unbearable stress, that he made mistakes but was not evil. Yet under cross-examination, she admitted she had heard them talk about the insurance, had heard Marcus threaten to convince me I was losing my mind. The sympathy in the room evaporated. The medical examiner confirmed the presence of methanol in Leonard's body after the exhumation. He described how the poison mimicked a stroke, how it explained every symptom Leonard endured before his death. The science was clear. Day after day, the case unfolded, each detail sharper than the last. The jury listened with growing horror, and the community held its breath. Finally, after 3 days of testimony, the closing arguments came. The prosecutor stood tall, his voice unwavering. Marcus and Darius Carter are not victims. They are predators who hunted their own father for money. They plotted, executed, and then sought to erase the evidence. They even planned to eliminate their mother, the very woman who gave them life. Do not mistake desperation for justification. This was calculated murder, and it cries out for justice. The defense muttered pleas for mercy, but their words felt hollow. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. The silence in the courtroom when they returned was suffocating. I heard my own heartbeat pounding in my ears as the foreman rose. On the charge of first-degree murder of Leonard Carter, we find the defendants guilty. Murmurs swept the gallery. My hands clutched the wooden bench, my body trembling. On the charge of conspiracy to commit the murder of Evelyn Carter, we find the defendants guilty. The judge's gavel struck. Order in the court. His voice carried the weight of finality. Marcus Carter and Darius Carter, for the murder of your father and the conspiracy to murder your mother, this court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 30 years. The air seemed to crack open around me. Relief, grief, and vindication crashed together in a flood that left me gasping. My sons had been condemned not by my word alone, but by their own. As the guards led them away, Marcus stumbled, his face pale and wet with tears. Darius stiffened, his jaw locked, but his eyes revealed the fear he tried to hide. I remained seated, tears streaming down my cheeks. Leonard had not died in vain. His final act of courage, hiring Raymond, had given us the truth that could not be buried. When I left the courthouse that evening, the crowd outside erupted in applause. Neighbors reached for my hands, strangers embraced me. Voices cried out that justice had been served. Yet inside my heart, there was no triumph, only sorrow laced with peace. I walked home under the glow of street lamps, exhausted but unbroken. Leonard's photograph awaited me on the mantel. I touched the frame and whispered, "It is done, my love. Justice is yours." The trial ended, but the echoes of it lingered in every corner of my life. Marcus and Darius were sent away in handcuffs, their futures sealed behind prison walls. I returned to my quiet house, the same house they had tried to take from me, and for the first time in many months, I slept through the night. Weeks later, news arrived from the prison. Marcus had taken his own life in his cell. The letter he left behind was short, filled with apologies and regrets. He wrote that money had blinded him, that he could not live with the weight of his choices. Darius suffered a breakdown when he learned of his brother's death. He was transferred to a psychiatric ward haunted by visions and guilt that no bars could contain. I could not feel triumph in their downfall. I only felt sorrow for the children they once were and pity for the men they had become. My sons were gone long before the trial lost to greed and desperation. All I could do was release them in my heart and hold on to Leonard's memory instead. I turned his repair shop into a garden. Rows of red roses, white lilies, and tall sunflowers grew where the tools once stood. Every Sunday, I carried fresh blooms to Leonard's grave, speaking to him as if he were still beside me on the porch. I told him about the foundation I started in his name, one that helps families who face betrayal and violence from within. His story became a shield for others, proof that silence can be broken and justice can prevail. The town never forgot what happened. Some called me a hero, others whispered that I was a woman cursed with tragedy. I did not care. I only knew that Leonard could rest in peace because the truth had been spoken and justice had been served. Life has grown quieter now. Detective Scott visits from time to time, always reminding me that Leonard trusted the right man. Gloria still comes by with coffee, keeping me company when the nights grow long. And I find comfort in the laughter of children passing by my fence, reminders that innocence still exists in this world. I no longer feel anger when I think of Marcus and Darius. I feel pity. They had all the love a parent could give, and they chose betrayal. They had a family that adored them, and they chose greed. Their punishment was not only prison, but the loss of the love they once had. Leonard's headstone reads, "Beloved husband, betrayed father, honorable man." And every time I kneel beside it, I whisper the same words. We made it, my love. The truth won. True family is not measured by blood, but by love and loyalty. Betrayal may wound, but truth heals deeper. Courage to confront injustice is stronger than fear of loss. Even when those closest turn against you, standing for what is right ensures that love, not lies, has the final word.